Anthony Todd Boyd has spent 30 years on death row, and now, at age 53, faces execution by nitrogen hypoxia, a controversial method that forces inmates to breathe pure nitrogen gas until they die from lack of oxygen. He was convicted for his role in the 1993 kidnapping and murder of Gregory Huguley, who prosecutors said was taken to a baseball field, taped to a bench, doused with gasoline, and set on fire over a $200 cocaine debt. But Boyd has maintained his innocence for 3 decades, saying simply, "I didn't kill anybody. I didn't participate in any killing." His execution is scheduled for October 23, 2025, just 6 days from now. To understand how we arrived at this moment, we need to go back to where it all began. Before that, hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love to hear from you. Details about Anthony Todd Boyd's early life remain scarce in the public record. Court documents reveal that Boyd was 21 years old at the time of the crime in 1993, which means he was born around 1971 or 1972. Unlike many death row cases where childhood trauma and abuse are extensively documented, Boyd's early years have not been widely chronicled in court records or media accounts. What we do know is that by 1993, Boyd had become entangled in the drug trade in Anniston, Alabama, a small city in the northeastern part of the state. He was a young man in his early 20s, and the choices he made that summer would define the rest of his life. The events of July 31st, 1993, would be disputed for the next 3 decades, but the undeniable facts are these. Gregory Huguley, known on the streets as New York, died a horrific death. The 32-year-old man was found the next morning at a baseball field in Munford, his body badly burned. According to prosecutors, the crime began with a debt. Gregory Huguley had gotten cocaine from Boyd and 3 other men, Sean Ingram, Marcel Ackles, and Quinty Cox, and failed to pay the $200 he owed. What started as a drug dispute escalated into something far more sinister. On the evening of July 31st, 1993, the 4 men were searching for Huguley in Anniston. When they spotted him on 15th Street, they were riding in a blue Astro van that Marcel Ackles had rented. Quinty Cox had provided a 9mm Mac 11 automatic pistol. The group approached Huguley, and what happened next would be described in chilling detail at trial. According to the prosecution's account, Sean Ingram took the automatic pistol and approached Huguley, telling him to come here. When Huguley hesitated, Ingram grabbed him and pushed him into the van onto the floor by the first bench seat. Huguley knew he was in danger. During the drive to the baseball field, as he lay on the floorboard of the van, Huguley kept pleading with his abductors, "Do not kill me. I will get your money." But there would be no mercy that night. The men made a stop at a gasoline station where Marcel Ackles purchased gasoline in a plastic container. Then they proceeded to a baseball field in the Munford community in North Talladega County. It was between 7 o'clock and 8 p.m. when they arrived at the field, a place where families would normally gather to watch softball games, where children would play under the lights. What happened at that baseball field would haunt everyone who heard about it. According to the prosecution's key witness, Quinty Cox, Sean Ingram made Huguley lie down on a bench. Marcel Ackles taped Huguley's hands and mouth, and Anthony Boyd taped his feet, all with duct tape. The victim was completely immobilized, helpless. Then, according to Cox's testimony, Sean Ingram poured gasoline on Huguley and made a 2-foot trail of gasoline from the bench. Ingram lit the trail of gasoline, which led to Huguley and caused him to catch fire. The prosecution's witness testified that Boyd and the other participants watched Huguley burn for 10 to 15 minutes until the flame went out. During the burning, Huguley rolled over a few feet before dying from the fire. It was a death of unimaginable agony, a human being burning alive while 4 men watched. The next afternoon, on August 1st, 1993, the Talladega County Sheriff's Department received a call to check the ball fields in Munford. When they arrived, they discovered Huguley's badly burned body lying underneath an oak tree where spectators would sit to watch softball games. A pair of cinder blocks were nearby, and a charred wooden board was next to him. Unable to identify the body initially, the state's forensic pathologist cut off a hand during the autopsy in order to take fingerprints. They came back as a match for Gregory New York Huguley, 32, who lived in Anniston. After the murder, Boyd and Sean Ingram left in the van and returned to Anniston, while Kintui Cox and Marcel Ackles returned to Anniston in Cox's car. On the way back, Marcel said to Kintui, "We are all in this together. If one goes down, all go down." They arrived back in Anniston around 7:45 to 8 p.m., but the investigation was already beginning. In the following month, Maurice Boyd, who was in the 3rd grade at the time, returned home from school to find his mother frantically trying to track down his older brother, Anthony Boyd. The authorities were closing in. The case against Boyd and his co-defendants would rest heavily on the testimony of Kintui Cox, who agreed to testify as part of a plea deal to avoid the death penalty himself. Under questioning, Cox admitted that a significant part of his story had changed between his initial statement to police in October 1993 and the statement he gave as part of his plea deal in late June 1994. In his first statement, he told investigators he stayed with the others in the van, but his later testimony changed key details. Boyd's defense team maintained from the beginning that he wasn't even there. At trial, Boyd's lawyers argued that he was at a party that night and did not commit the murder. 3 witnesses testified about seeing Cox and Boyd at a party late that Saturday night, even though Cox claimed he spent the entire night at his aunt's house following the murder. But the prosecution had Cox's testimony, and they had a horrific crime that demanded justice. Anthony Boyd and his co-defendants were arrested and charged with capital murder during a kidnapping. In 1995, a jury convicted Boyd of capital murder and kidnapping in the 1st degree. The evidence presented included Cox's testimony about Boyd taping Huguley's feet, the rental van records, and the timeline of events that terrible night. Following the conviction, the jury held a separate sentencing hearing and returned an advisory verdict recommending, by a vote of 10-2, the imposition of the death penalty. The vote wasn't unanimous. 2 jurors believed Boyd's life should be spared. The trial court held a separate sentencing hearing and sentenced Boyd to death by electrocution. During the sentencing phase, the trial court considered mitigating circumstances, including Boyd's age. He was only 21 years old at the time of the crime. But the aggravating factors, the kidnapping, the particularly heinous method of murder, and Boyd's participation in the crime, outweighed any mitigating evidence. Sean Ingram, the man prosecutors accused of actually pouring the gasoline and setting Huguley on fire, was also convicted of capital murder and is also on Alabama's death row. The 2 other co-defendants received life sentences without parole instead of death. Boyd was transferred to William C. Holman Correctional Facility in 1995, where he has remained for the past 30 years. Anthony Boyd entered Alabama's death row system at age 23. For 3 decades, he has lived in the shadow of execution, waiting for a date that has now finally arrived. Death row in Alabama is a place of isolation and monotony. Inmates spend most of their time in single cells, with limited human contact and minimal activities. But Boyd didn't simply wait to die. Instead, he transformed himself into something unexpected, an advocate, a leader, and a voice for others facing the same fate. Boyd became the chairman of Project Hope to abolish the death penalty, an anti-death penalty group founded by men on death row. The organization is the nation's only anti-death penalty organization run by death row prisoners. Project Hope meets at Holman and represents all 176 people on Alabama's 3 death rows, sending its newsletter to inmates awaiting execution. Boyd has chaired the group's board for about 7 years. During meetings, Boyd leads conversations about how spending money on education instead of the death penalty could transform the system. If you pay teachers what they're worth, there will be less crime and more scholars, but they want to spend money taking lives, he said. Esther Brown, Project Hope's executive director, helps from outside prison and has a close relationship with Boyd. "One of the many things I love about him is that he takes care of people," she said. Boyd is the 5th chairman Brown has worked with. 3 of the previous chairmen were executed. Has Boyd shown remorse? This remains one of the most contested questions in his case. Boyd has consistently maintained his innocence, stating, "I didn't kill anybody. I didn't participate in any killing." He cannot show remorse for a crime he says he didn't commit. In a letter written after the execution of Dominique Ray in February 2019, Boyd reflected on the emotional toll of executions. "Executions are never easy. You worry for the person going through it all. You worry about losing one of your own, and it makes you think about how it could be for you personally if something doesn't get done on your behalf. Boyd's appeals wound through the courts for years. One challenge included a writ of certiorari to the U.S. Supreme Court, which was denied in 2018, in which Boyd requested to be executed by hanging or firing squad instead of Alabama's approved methods at the time, which were electrocution and lethal injection. In early August 2025, another appeal was filed requesting a stay of his execution on grounds that individuals who committed similar crimes were prosecuted for felony murder instead of capital murder, arguing this violated the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. Every appeal has been denied. On August 18, 2025, Governor Kay Ivey announced that Anthony Todd Boyd's execution has been scheduled to begin at 12 a.m. on Thursday, October 23, 2025, and will expire on Friday, October 24, 2025, just 6 days from today. The execution will be carried out using nitrogen hypoxia, a method that has become deeply controversial. Alabama began using nitrogen gas in 2024 to carry out executions. The method uses a gas mask to replace breathable air with pure nitrogen gas, causing death from lack of oxygen. Alabama is only the second state to use this method, and Alabama has executed 5 inmates using the nitrogen protocol, with a 6th scheduled before Boyd's execution date. Ironically, Boyd selected nitrogen as his preferred execution method in 2018 when the state authorized it, though at the time Alabama did not have procedures for using it. He chose this method over the alternatives without knowing what it would actually entail. Boyd has filed a lawsuit challenging the nitrogen hypoxia method, arguing its application is unconstitutionally cruel. In his lawsuit, attorneys argued that each inmate previously executed using Alabama's nitrogen hypoxia protocol was observed to gasp for air and struggle against their harness for several minutes after the nitrogen would begin to flow, and showed signs of conscious suffocation, terror, and pain. Reverend Jeff Hood, Boyd's spiritual advisor who witnessed the first nitrogen execution, described what he saw. "What I saw was almost 8 minutes of heaving back and forth." When Hood demonstrated this at a press conference by wearing a gas mask similar to the one used by Alabama Department of Corrections, Boyd's mother became emotional and fell to the ground. Alabama officials have maintained that inmates put to death by nitrogen hypoxia lose consciousness quickly and do not experience pain that meets constitutional criteria for cruel and unusual punishment. The state has argued that the described movements were either inmates actively resisting or involuntary movements associated with dying. In recent weeks, Boyd's supporters have launched a public campaign to save his life. A billboard in Talladega reads, "Save Anthony Boyd," and family members and supporters have held rallies organized by the Execution Intervention Project. Boyd's godsister, Willie Maud Brooks, expressed her belief in his innocence. "If you would only know him, you would know that he's not a bad person. And if anything happened, it was not his fault, or anything, so please. He didn't kill nobody, he did not." His mother, Patricia Boyd McGrew, raised concerns about the fairness of his trial. "It is supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, but they already had tried convicting him before he even went to trial, and it's not fair, and something needs to be done about it." But Alabama Attorney General Steve Marshall's office released a statement saying Boyd's case has been litigated for 3 decades, and he has yet to provide evidence to show the jury got it wrong. The statement added, "There was no billboard campaign to save Huguley, and Boyd showed no concern for the ethics of execution when he helped murder Huguley." Governor Kay Ivey has stated she does not plan to grant clemency in Boyd's case. From prison, Boyd said he isn't just fighting for himself, but for my guys around him. "You are driving on a highway in a state that is gassing its citizens to death. I want them to see that sign, those billboards, and think about that." As the execution date approaches, Boyd said he will continue to fight. But unless something dramatic changes in the next 6 days, Anthony Todd Boyd will become the 7th person executed by nitrogen hypoxia in Alabama. Anthony Todd Boyd's case forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about justice, punishment, and truth. A man died a horrific death in 1993. Gregory Huguley was burned alive at a baseball field over $200. That is an undeniable fact. The question that has haunted this case for 30 years is, what exactly was Anthony Boyd's role in that murder? The prosecution's case rested largely on the testimony of a co-defendant who received a plea deal to avoid death row himself. Boyd has maintained his innocence for 3 decades. Witnesses testified he was at a party that night. Yet 2 different juries, one that convicted him and one that sentenced him to death, believed he was guilty enough to die. Boyd spent those 30 years not simply waiting to die, but working to help others facing the same fate. He became a leader, an advocate, a chairman of an organization fighting to abolish the very punishment he faces. Does that count for something? Should it? And then there's the method of execution itself. Alabama will use nitrogen hypoxia, a controversial procedure that witnesses describe as causing minutes of gasping and struggling, even as the state insists it's humane. Boyd chose this method years ago when it was just a theoretical alternative, never imagining what it would actually look like. In 6 days, unless there's a last-minute intervention, the state of Alabama will strap Anthony Todd Boyd to a gurney, place a gas mask over his face, and flood it with pure nitrogen until he dies from lack of oxygen. It will happen at Holman Correctional Facility, the same place where Boyd has spent the last 30 years of his life. Witnesses will be present. His family will be there. The family of Gregory, Huguley, may be there too, finally seeing what they believe is justice after more than 3 decades of waiting. What do you think about this case? Boyd spent 30 years on death row for a crime he says he didn't commit, convicted largely on the testimony of a co-defendant who made a deal to save his own life. Does that raise reasonable doubt? Or is 30 years of unsuccessful appeals proof that justice was served? Should a man who became a leader and advocate on death row receive mercy? Or does the horrific nature of Gregory Huguley's death demand the ultimate punishment regardless? And what about nitrogen hypoxia? Is it a humane alternative to lethal injection, or a cruel experiment on human beings? These questions don't have easy answers, but they matter. Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story made you think about the complexities of capital punishment and justice, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into cases that challenge how we think about crime and punishment in America.